All right, 10 more tips to make you lightning fast in Davinci Resolve. Within each tip is a tip within a tip or a way of using it that you didn't know. So sit back, grab your coffee, follow along if you can, and let's dive in with tip number 1, which is set poster frame. So let's first talk about what is a poster frame. It's essentially the thumbnails that you're going to see in your media pool here. And right now, I can't tell which clip is which. I'm gonna have to click through each one or scrub over each one to try to find that single clip, and it takes up a lot of time. So first, I'm gonna give myself a little bit more space, and I'm gonna click this drop down to move the timeline over to the side and give me more space here. And then I'm going to get this slider and make all of my thumbnails larger so I can really watch the video clip while I scrub through. With this folder, as you see, I can't tell what's going on, especially with all these clips right here. So what you can do is you just hover scrub over. And so, okay, so he's in the water talking there. I'm going to click and select it and then hit Command P. And that's going to set a poster frame. You'll see now once I scroll away, it stays on that frame. Even if I click, scroll, go through and go off the end here, it goes right back to that frame, builds out a thumbnail. And so I did that for most of the clips in this folder, and you can see the differences as I scrub now. I can see exactly how the day progressed, what clip I'm looking for. Maybe I'm looking for when he tried the backflip, boom, they're all right here. I can find it super fast. And you don't have to do this for every clip. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. But if there's a clip that you know you need, there was one moment of that day or 1, 2, 3 moments, and you just want to be able to find that clip super fast while you're editing, this is a great way to make that process so much easier. Now, there have been times that this can be a little bit buggy. Maybe you set a poster frame and it just doesn't stick. One thing that helps is to turn off Live Media Preview. Live Media Preview is when you are scrolling through the footage and it's going to show up in your source viewer right here. So go ahead, click these 3 dots, turn off Live Media Preview, set all your poster frames, turn it back on because it will be really useful for this next tip, which is place on top. Now in my first video, I taught you IOP, which is in, out, place. And as I hover scrub here, I hit I for an in point, O for an out point, and P to place it at the end of the timeline. Super useful, really fast way to build out your whole timeline. But what if you already have your A roll and now you want to start placing things on top as B roll or on top of that or more audio layers underneath? Well, it's pretty much the same process. So I'm going to open up the assets folder and now I can scroll through and listen to the interview. And once he talks about, let's say when he was on the hot ones, I can pull that up, scrub to a point that I like. And so maybe him talking right here on the hot ones, that was funny. And then I'll hit Shift P and that's just going to place it on top as B-roll. Really fast way to go about that. But what if you don't want the audio to come with it? This is an interview. I just want the video. That's going to take us to tip number 3, which is video audio only. So typically what people would do is that they would grab this icon here and they would click and drag that for video only, or you can click and drag here for audio only. And it's just not a fast workflow. So how can we still use our keyboard shortcut and choose if we want audio or video only? That's going to be on the timeline tracks here. All I have to do is make sure that there's not an audio track with this orange box around it right there. So I'll just click that, turn that off. And now that Davinci says, hey, I'm not going to put audio anywhere, I can go back to my source footage, hit Shift P, and it's only going to drop the video on top, which is super useful when you're wanting to do B-roll, especially with an interview or something like this. But maybe you just want to do audio. Same thing, turn the audio track back on, make sure you have an orange box around it, turn the video track off, and I can just do Shift P, and that's going to add the audio. Tip number 4, insert. Now there's many different ways to do this. Let's say within this interview, I forgot a section. I forgot to put this whole area in. So what you see a lot of people do is that they will use a tip from my last video and they'll go Option Y and they'll select everything on one side, click, drag, drop that in, delete the gap, and you've inserted the clip. Not very efficient. So I'm going to click and drag from the source footage here and you can just hit insert, which is great. But what if I want to move this clip to right there? Well, what you'd see is people go there and then drag that over and try to bring it back down. Not efficient, that sucks. Just hold down Command and Shift and then click and drag your footage and it will move everything over to the right of that footage. It will insert it in place. Now you have to be really careful with this, especially with complex timelines. When you just have a single video track or maybe 2 tracks, just a couple of them, it's easy to see if something doesn't line up or sync up. But if you've gotten to a super complex timeline and maybe you've activated and deactivated certain tracks, you forgot to turn some back on, it can move everything over, but one track will stay the same. So sometimes I will use one of the tips in my previous video, which is that Option Y or Command Y, and select everything to one side, move things over. But when it's still in the beginning stages, it's simple. The Command Shift drag helps a ton, and dragging into the main viewer. And you have all these options here, and using the insert function works really well. Tip number 5, you have options. So the option key is actually very useful in Davinci Resolve. It does quite a few things, probably more than I'm going to explain here, and probably more than I even know. But let's say you're clicking through clips, and you'll notice that both audio and video are selected. That's because they are linked. So you can turn off linking and just select individual clips. And you'll notice if you ever drag video away from audio, it will tell you how off sync it is. So that is very useful. But if you don't want to be turning this on and off nonstop throughout your editing, and you just every now and then want to select a single clip, hold down Option, and that will do the same thing. If you hold down Option, it will only select the clip under it. And not only that, but it will just do the inverse of whether this is on or not. So if I turn that off, and now I'm only selecting one clip, but I can hold down Option and it will select the linked clips. Very useful feature. What else it does is copying and pasting. If I just hold down Option while I click and drag something, it will copy and paste it. It will just duplicate it and I can move it where I need it to go. And it's a much safer way of doing things, because if you're doing Command C and then Command V, it might paste it on the wrong track, and it increases your risks of accidentally putting it on the wrong track, overwriting footage. So Option, drag, very useful. Tip number 6, clip and track colors. So by default, Davinci Resolve gives us these video tracks in blue and the audio tracks in green, which isn't a great visual aid once you start building out your timeline and you're trying to find certain clips and you want to know what you can do with those clips. So I'm going to select every single media folder here. I'm going to hold down Shift and select all the folders and bring up everything. What I like to do is I like to color code them by frames per second, because I want to know once it's in the timeline, can I slow this down 50% to 25%? So how do we do that? We're going to go into the list view, and I'm going to sort it by frames per second. If you don't see that, go ahead and right click in the top area here and go down to FPS and turn that on. I'll click the first one at 120 frames per second, and I will once again hold down Shift and click the bottom one. I'm going to right click, go down to clip color, and pick a color that's going to stand out. I'm going to pick orange. And now I'm going to do the same for the 60 frames per second. So I will select all of those and I'll choose yellow for these. And so now each clip will have a color according to its frame rate, but you can also do colors for maybe certain scenes, maybe certain people. And it just makes things a lot easier to go through your timeline and say, hey, clips of this color were shot in this frame rate, or were shot on this day, or at this scene. It makes things a whole lot easier. And what's also great is even if you've already built out your entire timeline, you can still do this and it will update it in the timeline. This is not something you have to do before starting your project. You can be building it out and then change the colors. Maybe you want to say, hey, frames per second, so I can slow things down, but now I want to change it to scenes or whatever. You can be changing the colors and just keep it organized so that whatever you're working on, you can visually find as fast as possible. So another great way to use color for your timeline, instead of just on the clip level, is to do it on the track level. Let's say this video track 3 is where I'm going to put all of my B-roll and assets, graphics, whatever. I can just right click on that video 3 track, change track color, and let's make that pink. So now if I move it off that track, it won't have that color, but if anything that goes into that track will be the pink color, and it makes it easier to see where your graphics and everything are. Maybe my text, I want my text to be a different color. I'm going to put all my text within 1 or 2 different video tracks, and we're going to make that beige. And so now anything on either of these tracks will follow the color suit, and if you decide to take it off, it isn't locked into the actual clip itself. And here's a timeline that's a great example as to using the color coding system and how it makes things look more organized. I have my little graphics and text up here to say which camera it's being shot on. This is a DJI Osmo Action 5 Pro versus the GoPro Hero 13 video we're working on. And you can see the color code system on frame rates. So I can see, all right, these orange clips I can slow down to 25%, and these yellow clips I can slow down to 50%. So when you're speed ramping, I don't have to keep checking what frame rate it was shot in. This next tip comes based off of a question in my recent video from Andrew Christie Photo, who said, what if you want one timeline to take up the whole monitor and have your screen on your second monitor? Which, if you're a video editor, you should have multiple monitors, at least 2. I only use 2, but you should have multiple monitors. So he's essentially asking, how can I get my timeline on one monitor and my video on another monitor so that my video preview isn't taking up my whole entire screen? Now, Davinci does have a dual screen workspace, a dual screen mode, and it sucks. It's not modular. You can't move things around. It's clunky. I don't use it. I don't know many people that do use it. So how are we going to get the timeline as big as possible and still be able to view our footage? That's going to be video clean feed. So since this is a complicated timeline, I want it to be as large as possible so I can find what I need to find. And that makes this preview window super tiny. Head over to Workspace and find Video Clean Feed. That's where you'll see a drop down of your displays. LG Ultra Wide is my main display, and the AM display is something that I use to connect my iPad as a secondary monitor, which I highly recommend if you don't want to fork out a ton of money on a color accurate monitor. If most of what you're making is viewed on Apple devices or mobile, the colors look great, the screen is great. And then you also just have an iPad, which I will take on shoots to take notes. It's great. I wish I had gotten one sooner. So once you turn that on, you'll notice that it fills the whole screen of whatever monitor that you choose. So now I'm not relying on this tiny window up here. I can make that as small as I want, get my timeline nice and big, and have a lot more space to work with while still having a full screen preview with what I'm working on. And it also makes color grading a lot more fun because you have a full screen to see what you are grading. And this grade isn't done yet. I'm having a lot of fun with it. I'm using something called Dehancer, full tutorial coming soon. It gives it that really cool filmy look, but that'll be in a future video, so stay tuned for that one. And speaking of staying tuned, apparently YouTube has the buttons glow now when you say those words. So I'm curious, let me know down below if they were glowing once I say like, comment, subscribe. Did they glow? Did you click them? Tip number 8, selection follows playhead. So once you have your timeline built out and you want to start making changes to these clips, by default, once you click on a clip, it's going to keep that clip selected. No matter where your playhead is, no matter what you're playing and doing, it's going to keep this selected even though the playhead's way over here and going through the timeline over here, which can be a great thing, but can also be really annoying if you want to make a lot of changes to clips while you play it through. If you want to zoom that one in real quick, and then you want to zoom this one in, you have to click on it, go back over here, zoom back in. And it's just a little bit more tedious and takes a lot more time when you have hundreds of clips that you want to make changes to. So we're going to do selection follows playhead. And that's going to be under timeline, and scroll down to selection follows playhead. Another quick tip, if you ever know that something exists, but you don't know if it's under timeline, edit, clip, marked, just click the help tab and type in what you were looking for, and it will hover, and you can still just click it right from there and turn it on. And now you can see as it plays through, it is selecting the clip. So if I want to make a quick change to this clip and zoom it in, and then go to the next clip and move that one over, I don't have to go back to the timeline and click on the clip. It just automatically selects. But what if you're going through and you have something like text or adjustment clips or something that you don't want to make changes to? Well, head over here to the auto track selector. Selection follows playhead is always going to choose the uppermost layer with something on it. If you want it to bypass that, turn off the auto track selector for that track, and now it will bypass that layer and go to the next available clip underneath. So this is extremely useful when you want to make changes immediately. You're playing it back, you're watching it through, and it's just going to select whatever you're watching, and you know whatever edits you're making are at the time point that you're actually viewing and looking at. And it makes adding one of my favorite effects super fast, which is tip number 9, dynamic zooming. And for those who don't know what a dynamic zoom is, it's essentially a keyframe zoom. In other editing softwares, you would go up to the inspector, you would add a keyframe at the beginning, go to the end, and then zoom in, and with that red keyframe, you see that it added a new keyframe and it is zooming in. But there is a much faster and easier way to do this, thanks to Davinci Resolve's dynamic zoom feature. And by default, it's going to zoom out. And for this project, I want it to zoom in. It's about tech, it's about the Ronin RS4. I was hired to film that new gimbal. It's incredible, and I want it to be in your face and just zooming in. So in order to do that, you simply just go over here and hit swap. And if you want to change your zoom amount, and maybe you want it to move from left to right, side to side, not just a straight on zoom, you're going to go over to this icon, which will be defaulted at your transform controls, and go ahead and click the drop down and select dynamic zoom. That will bring up this green and red box. The green box is where your frame will start, and the red box is where your frame will end. So if I want this to zoom in a whole lot more, and we'll just make this absurdly aggressive, and now when I play it back, you see it zooming in a whole lot more. But what's great about the dynamic zoom is it doesn't have to just be for zooms. If you want to keyframe motion among a whole entire clip, I can set my starting point way over here, set my ending point over here, and now instead of a dynamic zoom, I actually have a little slide going through. So it's an easy way to create motion, not have to do a whole bunch of keyframes, and you can even ease it without having to bring up your retime curve and worry about those weird handles. Now I'm going to pick ease in and out. And that's going to make it a little bit smoother of a zoom effect. It's not just going to zoom at the same amount the whole entire time. It's going to kind of ramp zoom and then slow down. And I didn't have to go into retime curves or anything weird. But for this video, we're actually going linear because it's a little bit more jarring and super zoomy, and I like it. Without dynamic zoom, look how boring these clips are. The static, kind of boring shots, not very compelling. But once I activate dynamic zoom on all of these tracks, look at how much more compelling and how much more these clips really draw you in from a simple effect that you can do right within the inspector window. This is also a great effect to add to adjustment clips because I have two clips here, and it's this cool little stop motion where I got the stop motion and then I just reversed it, and it has this cool effect like it's moving back and forth. And if I add dynamic zoom to both of these clips, it's going to reset at the next clip and not look good at all. And that's why it's great just to add it to an adjustment clip. So that way we have the same subtle zoom in throughout the whole entire clip and makes it look a lot more seamless. And that's not just for doing it over two clips. Sometimes I'll do it over really long segments, maybe a full 5-minute, 3-minute talking head. It just has this very small zoom in. It kind of slowly sucks the viewer in. They don't even know it's happening, but it just adds that little bit of motion, little bit of cinematic sprinkle that makes it more enjoyable to watch. Tip number 10 is audio transcription search. And this tip is gonna save me a ton of time editing this video because I pulled an all-nighter and we leave at 1 a.m. for our honeymoon, so I thought it'd be a good idea. I've been stumbling over my words and there's been lots of bad takes. And this is how it's gonna save me. If you right-click on a clip and go down to audio transcription, it'll automatically transcribe the clip for you, and it might take some time, so just be patient because it's doing a lot of work for you. And once it's done, you'll get this audio transcription of that whole entire clip. And what's really cool is that if you click at any point, it'll go to that point in the video. And if you highlight a section, you'll see it created this in and out point. And if I hit P with place, I can place it on the timeline. What else is really nice is that we can search. So if I want to search tip number 1, and click that, it's going to highlight those areas and I can go right to it. And maybe I want to find the part where I talk about the cut page. So I can easily search that, highlight that whole area, and I can either append to the end, insert, or place on top. So if I want to insert that right here, I'm just going to click that insert icon, and it moved that section of the video right there on the timeline. Now this isn't only something that you can do in the media pool, you can actually do it for a whole entire timeline if you want to find something later on. So I'm going to go to the timeline in my media pool. I'll just right click on my tab there and go to find timeline in media pool. And I will do the same thing. I'm going to right click and go to audio transcription. And here you have multiple options: transcribe, nested clip. This time we're just going to use the regular transcribe. And just like that, we have a transcription of our entire timeline. And anywhere you click now, it's going to move your playhead to that position in the timeline. What's great about that is I can search maybe mouse. Now I can go exactly where I'm talking about this mouse and start putting my B-roll on top. I can highlight that section and it's going to create an in and an out point for me on the timeline. An easy way to clear that is to just hit Option X, and that's going to clear your in and out points. And how that's going to help me in this video so much is after each take that I liked, I said the words "good take." So that way I can just search good take and then get the section before it, know that it was a good one that I was happy with, and move on with my editing. Like this. Good take. All right, I'm saving one of the best for last, but before we get to that, I just want to say thank you so much. The previous video, you guys loved it. If you haven't seen it, please check that out. I'm leaving for my honeymoon. I'm deliriously tired. And if you want to keep track with more of my personal life and the skydiving and all the fun stuff that I do, hit me up on Instagram, Connor John, or if you ever have any questions, you can message me directly on there. I will be happy to help, and let me know in the comments below what you'd like to see next, because I'm not only going to be doing editing tutorials. I like cameras, anything creative, but let's finish this off with one of my favorite tips, which is effing find it. All right, I'm gonna make this quick. If you want to pull a clip up into your source viewer on this side, just hit F, and it's gonna put it in your source viewer. Very, very convenient. Now, if you want to find that in your media pool, maybe you want to change the clip color within the media pool, or you just need to access it, or go back and check the clip because maybe something else was in it and you were like, oh, that was part of that clip, where is it? Then just hit Option F. And that's going to bring it up here in your media pool. So thank you so much. If you made it this far, you're a real one. Comment down below your favorite ice cream flavor. Until next time, toodles.